Here we have an Apple Macintosh LC II, another system that came from the Mega Load pickup. And if you remember back to part 1 of that video when we took a look at this thing, I said LC stood for low cost, or in the case of this machine, leaking capacitors. So the front of our little computer just has a single 3.5-inch floppy drive, and like most Macintoshes of the time, no eject button to be seen. Rather, that mechanism in here is motorized. And the back of the case just has the usual selection of ports, power supply over here, Apple 15-pin video output, printer, modem, external SCSI, ADB, Apple data bus, and then speakers and microphone. Our little Macintosh obviously spent its life in a professional setting because you can see it has been pat tested. It's even dated here, 17th of April 98. And the case has taken quite a bit of yellowing, but unfortunately it's raining. That's all it seems to do here in Northern Ireland. So no retro brightening today. There's not much we can do about the weather, so let's just get into this machine and take a look at those caps. So there is meant to be a screw here, but that's already missing. All we'll have to do to get into the pizza box is lift on those two tabs. And as I said earlier, all of these electrolytic surface mount capacitors have leaked, or certainly the vast majority of them anyway. The telltale sign is the dull solder points, almost green looking actually. I would say all these have leaked quite severely. So there's these ones here and another 3 up here beside the power connector. On the motherboard itself, the system is driven by a 68030 processor, and despite that being a 32-bit processor, it is in here sitting on a 16-bit data bus, so it is somewhat crippled. We do have a single expansion slot here, which I understand can be used for accelerator cards. Typical set of ROMs, some onboard memory, I believe 4 megabytes in total. There is room to expand the system memory there. This memory module is for the video RAM. This machine was available with option for 256K or 512. Googling the part number on this one, 6700605A. This seems to be the 512K variant, which should allow us to run at a resolution of 640 by 480 with 256 colours. Internal power supply that we will be testing shortly. There's our floppy drive, speaker, fan that needs a good clean along with the rest of it, and a Quantum 80 megabyte SCSI hard drive. But we need to get our motherboard out of here if we're going to replace these capacitors, so let's just see if we can tear the rest of this down. The battery here, by the way, I removed when we initially looked at this machine. It hadn't leaked. That's one good thing anyway. Now, how does this motherboard come out? Because I don't see any screws holding it in place. There's a tab here and a tab here. Almost looks to me as if the board needs to slide back. And then that tab there will release the motherboard through that cutout there, which is the same on the other side. And it looks as if there's a clip here and here stopping the motherboard from moving, so let's pull them out of the way. And there we are. Good old Apple engineering. And just quickly, before we take the case off the bench, I want to test this power supply. It should be giving us +5, -5 and +12 outputs. Let's see what it's doing. So the black should be ground. Orange That's +5. Yellow, +12. A wee bit low, but that's fine. Blue must be -5, and yes, our power supply is good. So there are a couple of different methods that people use to get these old capacitors off. One that you see quite a bit of is the pair of pliers. Just grab the can and twist it off its legs. Now, my issue with doing that, and the reason that I don't do it, is that the twisting action puts a lot of mechanical force onto the legs and onto the board. The pads here that this thing or any of these are soldered to could be weakened from the leaking electrolytic. So if you twist with those pads weakened, there is a chance you will rip them off. And if you ask anyone who does a lot of this work, replacing capacitors, especially in the Amiga community where they leak quite badly in the A600, A1200, etc., missing pads is not uncommon for people who twist these things off. Now, the way I generally have been doing it is with the hot air. Mask off the area in question with the high temperature tape. Just use hot air to melt the solder, and the old capacitor, you just flick it out of the way. That is not without problem itself though, because you are heating the board. There is risk that you could cause damage that way, or surrounding components could move out of their position. So one other method that I've seen actually on Gadget UK's YouTube channel, which I highly recommend by the way, is to use 2 soldering irons. So that's what we're going to try and do today. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of flux either side of the cap. A little bit, I said, that's far too much, but whatever. And then I'm going to try and flow a bit of fresh solder onto the pads either side. And then I'll take the 2 irons and see if we can get it off. Obviously just applying the heat to both sides. And there we are. That was ridiculously easy. That cap just fell off straight away. That is definitely the way to do this. And it absolutely stinks. It's got that telltale fishy sign. These things have definitely leaked. Let's just see if we can do another one. Let's try one of these bigger ones here. And same again, just a bit of fresh solder on each side. Yep, fell off again. Relatively easy. That one was definitely a bit harder to get off. The pads were just more heavily corroded. Plus this iron isn't the best. I just want to be sure there that we haven't damaged that pad. Let's see if I can clean it up. No, it's fine. So I'll just take all the rest of them off using the same method. Then it'll just be tidying up with the braid, as you just seen me doing there. Then a bit of IPA. One thing I am a little concerned about though is this processor itself, because some of the legs of that have also got quite green. That is quite a fine pitch. I really don't fancy having to try reflowing that. So hopefully we can just clean that up even with the fiberglass pen. One thing at a time though. Let's get these caps off. Well, that's all the old capacitors off, and I've given the board a bit of a clean just with IPA and cotton buds. I am still a bit concerned about this processor. The legs on it definitely don't look happy. They have taken a bit of corrosion. I did try to tidy them up with the fiberglass pen and they have came up a bit, but it still doesn't look great. But one step at a time. Let's fit the new capacitors. We'll test the board, and if it's giving us any problems, we could have a closer look at that chip. So I'll just tackle one of these on the camera, because you've seen me do this loads of times before. Let's do C13 here, and this is 47 UF 16 volt. Just going to start with a wee bit of flux on the pads. And the way I like to do this anyway is to tin up one of the pads first of all. Then we'll just offer up the capacitor. Heat that solder again. And that's that side on. Then I've just flipped the board over to make this easy for myself since I'm left-handed. And with a bit of solder on the iron, just get the other side down. Well, I've run into a bit of a problem here. This pad came off. I was just trying to fit this capacitor, and that pad, which is on the ground side, just fell off the board. Oh well. Obviously it must have been damaged from leaking electrolytic, but we need to fix it. So what I'm going to do, as you can see the trace coming down here to a via there, and I'm just going to take a little bit of the Kynar wire, put that through the via, and just bend it over, wrap it around maybe a couple of times, and we'll solder the cap onto the exposed wire here instead. Or at least that's what I'm going to try and do. That is a bit of a blob of solder on that, but I won't be too fussed, just as long as I can get this cap on. So I've also just tinned up the leg of this capacitor on that side to try and make this a wee bit easier. Yep, it's on the wire, and hopefully with that other side soldered down, that'll help hold everything in place. All the caps are fitted, everything's cleaned up, and the board is back in the case. Let's test it. And we're just hooked up to this monitor. Here we go. Well, no boing, but there is a video signal, which is seemingly just a black screen. Now, I don't know if you heard it or not, but I could definitely hear the audio circuit coming to life, because I could hear like a pop out of the speaker just as it powered on, but no chime. So it's not just the caps. Replace the caps, that'll fix it. Yeah, right. Well, I've been at this for hours, but not really getting anywhere fast. The two clocks, they're fine. Reset circuit, that's fine. There is activity on all the RAM, but there's no activity anywhere else. Well, not really anyway. Certainly nothing on the data lines coming from the ROMs, and not very much around the CPU. Now, these legs on this are not good, but there's nothing loose. I suppose I should have a go at reflowing this. But to be honest with you, my gut instinct here are these. Bus transceivers, and if I'm reading the schematic correctly, these essentially translate the data bus from this side of the board across to this side of the board. Thing is, I don't have any of these to try and swap out. I do have through-hole versions, right enough, and I suppose I could jury-rig them in there, but it might be better just to try and get the proper surface mount ones. I'm of two minds, you know, whether to even bother trying to reflow around this CPU, just because the pitch on that is so fine, and as you know, my soldering skills are not that good. In fact, since this is still connected, let me show you what it's doing. So there's the activity on the RAM, as I was talking about. That's on the address lines, which are wired directly out of this component. These two bus transceivers though, that handle the data lines, That's the read-write pin on it, or the directional pin on it, and as you can see it's stuck low on both of them, and all the data lines are low there, but on this side there's just nothing happening. On the ROMs, that's the data lines there, but no activity. That's just ground, and those ones are data. Nothing. Does anyone have any ideas? What do you think has failed on this board? Because to be honest with you, I am at a bit of a loss. I genuinely don't think this is going to make any difference, but let's just have a go at reflowing the CPU. I'm sure as hell not going to make it any worse anyway, because it doesn't work. Well, we've got nice shiny new pins on the CPU. Well, at least where they connect to the board anyway. And while I was at it, I also reflowed those two bus transceivers. Is this going to fix it? Nope. But let's just confirm that. Still no sound out of the speaker, although you could hear it pop there. That was just the audio circuit coming to life. And the screen is still black. And just to make sure we haven't made it any worse, yeah, we still have that activity on the RAM that we were seeing before. On the bus transceivers, that pin is still low, as are all the rest of them. And there's no activity on the bus lines coming this way. Nothing happening over on those ROMs still. It's dead. Well, you can't win them all, and we certainly haven't this time. The Macintosh LC II, Apple intended that to mean low cost. At the start of the video, I thought it was maybe just leaky caps, but by the end, well, it's lots of confusion. I really don't know what's wrong with this machine. Could it be those bus transceivers, or could it be something else? If anyone has any ideas, please let me know down in the comment section. Could it even be dodgy ROMs? Maybe those 4 ROM chips have failed. But that is it for now. So if you enjoyed this video, despite the fact that we didn't fix this, I would still appreciate a thumbs up. Why not hit subscribe if you haven't done so already? Still plenty more yet to come here on CRG, and I'll see you next time.